The platform at Millbrook Station still lives somewhere in my hands. I was 15. My mother had rolled the window down exactly halfway. I remember the exact halfway, because the cold air hit only the top half of my face, and not the bottom, and details like that are what you remember when your mind is trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. My stepfather kept both hands on the wheel. He stared at the road out of the station lot like it was the most important road he had ever seen, and like the girl standing on the platform behind him was somebody else's concern. There was a canvas bag at my feet. My good winter coat was still in the backseat. My mother's voice came through the half-open window. It was the voice she used for final things. Let's see how she finds her way home. The car moved slowly at first, then faster. The taillights turned onto the county road and went red in the dark, and then there was just the platform, and the cold and the sound of a train somewhere farther away than I needed it to be. I never went back. Not that night, not that month, not in 18 years. But here's the part of the story that matters. 18 years later, they came to find me. And what they found was not a girl who had learned her lesson. Welcome back to Sweet Payback Stories. If you've ever had someone tell your story for you and get it completely wrong, this story is for you. Subscribe and stay until the end, because some lies last for years, until the truth finally walks into the room. My name is Nell Reese. I am 33 years old. I own a bookbinding and print restoration studio on a quiet street in Harlow, Vermont, in a building that used to be a pharmacy and still has the original pressed tin ceiling and the long wooden counter I refinished myself over 3 weekends with a borrowed sander and a borrowed patience. I want to tell you who I was at 15 before I tell you what they did with the night, because the thing that happened on that platform was not an accident. It was a decision about a girl, and you should know what the girl was actually like before you believe what they said she was. I was 15 and I was quiet. Not shy quiet, careful quiet, the kind of quiet that forms around a child who has learned that speaking the wrong thing at the wrong moment changes the temperature of a house immediately and lasts for days. I read everything. I kept my room clean without being asked. I got good grades without anyone checking. I had a specific talent for noticing details, the exact angle of a person's shoulders when they were about to say something unkind, the specific pitch of a voice going flat before it went cold. My mother, Sandra, was 40 at the time, pretty in the way that photographs well, which had always mattered to her. She'd married my stepfather, Dale Pruitt, when I was 11, and Dale was the kind of man who agreed with whatever the last person he'd spoken to had said, which meant he agreed with my mother about everything and had since the second week of their marriage. My older half-brother Brandon was 22 and long gone from the house, which was a fact I had made peace with because Brandon's absence meant the attention split was no longer 3 ways. The argument in the car that evening was about a grade. I had received a B+ in AP History. My teacher had docked 2 points for a formatting issue I hadn't been told about in advance, which I had tried to explain. My mother had heard me explain it and decided I was making excuses, and the explanation itself, the act of trying to correct the record, had become the offense. You always have to be right, she said from the front seat. You always have to have the last word. I said I hadn't said a last word. I said I was only trying to explain what happened, which was, in retrospect, a last word. My mother told Dale to pull off at the next stop. He did. Millbrook Station was 22 miles from our house, which I know because I counted the mile markers on the drive and I later confirmed it on a map. The station served one route, the regional commuter line, and at 8:40 on a school night in November, it was staffed by a single ticket agent and lit by 4 overhead fluorescents that turned everything a specific shade of institutional yellow. My mother told me to get out. I thought it was a scare. I had been threatened with things before that did not happen, and I had learned to assess whether the threat was real or not, and in this assessment, I got it wrong. I got out. I stood on the platform. I waited for the doors to unlock. The engine didn't cut. My mother's voice came through the half-open window. Let's see how she finds her way home. The car moved out of the station lot and the taillights went red on the county road, and then there was just me on an empty platform in November with a canvas bag and no coat and the particular silence that descends on a place once the last car has left it. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because I had to sit with it for 18 years before I was ready to do anything about it. Here is the part they never told. I did not freeze. I did not wander. I did not make any of the decisions a frightened child might make that would give them the story they wanted, the wild one, the dramatic one, the one who couldn't be managed. I picked up my bag and I walked inside. The ticket agent assistant was a man named Gus Ferreira. He was 50-something, heavy in the shoulders, with a face that had seen enough of the world to recognize a child alone on a platform at night for exactly what it was. When I told him what had happened, flat little voice, the facts in order, the way I always gave information, his face changed. Not with pity, with the specific focus of a person who has understood that something is required of him. He did not ask me what I had done to deserve it. He picked up the phone. He called the Millbrook County Sheriff's Department. Then he talked to me in a low, steady voice about whether I was cold and whether I wanted water, and what my favorite subject was in school, because he was keeping me present while the other things happened around me. A deputy named Officer Coates arrived within 40 minutes. She was young, maybe late 20s, with her dark hair pulled back and a notebook she opened before she sat down across from me in the waiting area. She asked me what happened and wrote it down in the notebook. Every detail, the argument, the mile markers, the half-open window, the voice. She tried to reach my parents by the number I gave her. It rang. She left a message. She left a second message 20 minutes later. She noted both attempts in her report along with the fact that neither was returned. I did not know then how much that notation would matter. A woman appeared in the station around 10 o'clock. She had come in from across the street, where she ran a small used bookshop that also did minor print repair, a trade she had inherited from her own father and practiced with the specific devotion of someone who believes that the preservation of words is a form of moral work. Her name was Irene Marsh. Irene was in her mid-50s, thin, with the kind of posture that comes from decades of leaning over light tables examining manuscripts. She wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck and a canvas apron over her clothes, because she had been working in the back when she saw the squad car's lights through her front window. She came over, she said, because a bookshop owner on a quiet street knows when something unusual is happening, and she was not a woman who went to bed while unusual things were happening nearby. She listened to Officer Coates explain the situation in neutral professional language. Then she looked at me over the top of her glasses for a long time. Then she said I could sleep in the back room above the shop. She said the deputy knew her, which I later understood meant the town knew her, which was a form of recommendation that held more weight than any credential. Officer Coates looked at me. I said yes, not because I felt safe, exactly, because I felt that Irene Marsh was a woman who had decided something, and when Irene Marsh decided something, the thing happened. I was right about that. I slept on a narrow cot in the room above the bookshop that smelled like paper and cold radiator heat and the specific dry smell of old bindings. In the morning, Irene put toast on a plate and set it on the work table beside me without ceremony and handed me an apron. She said if I was going to be there, I could learn to do something useful with my hands, and something in my chest that had been clenched since the platform let go, just slightly, because useful was a thing I knew. Useful was something I had always been. One night became a week. A week became the rest of my growing up. The story my mother told was already being told before the end of that first week. A social worker named Donna Price came out to see me on day 4. She was matter-of-fact and careful, and she carried a manila folder that already had pages in it when she sat down across from me in the bookshop's back room. She told me she had spoken with my mother. I asked what she said. Donna hesitated the way people hesitate when they are deciding how much truth a person can hold. Then she gave it to me straight. My mother had told the county that I had run away. She said I had always been dramatic. She said I had a pattern of overreacting, of making mountains from normal family discipline. She said she was heartbroken, but not surprised, and that she hoped I would come to my senses. She said it to the social worker. She said it to the neighbors. She said it to the women at her church group. She said it to anyone who asked and some who didn't. Nell ran off. She was always difficult. We gave her everything and she threw it back at us. Donna Price had written it all in her notes, including the exact phrasing, because Donna Price was thorough in the way that good caseworkers are thorough. She knew that the version people tell and the version that happened are often different things, and she wrote both down. She asked if I wanted to go home. I said no. I said it without pause, which seemed to tell her something. The county made a formal arrangement with Irene, who agreed to it with the practical efficiency of a woman who had already made up her mind and was simply completing the paperwork. My mother signed the documents. She signed them. She did not fight the arrangement, did not appeal, did not call the shop asking to speak to me. She signed signed the documents and kept telling people I had run away, and the two things coexisted in her the way a lot of contradictions coexist in people who have decided their own comfort is more important than their accuracy. Donna Price gave me her card before she left. She said the file would stay open until I turned 18 and that everything in it was mine when I needed it. I put the card in the inner pocket of the canvas bag I had carried off the platform. I did not touch it for 18 years, but I knew it was there. The years with Irene were not soft. She was not a soft woman, and she did not raise a soft child. She had opinions about bookbinding and paper weight, and the proper way to repair a torn map, and she communicated these opinions the way a craftsperson communicates knowledge, through doing, through correction, through the specific silence that meant you had done something wrong, and she was waiting for you to figure out which thing. I learned to read paper under a loupe. I learned to make paste from wheat starch, the way it had been done before chemicals took over. I learned to sew signatures into covers with thread that would outlast anyone who owned the book. I learned that the act of repair, of taking something damaged and giving it back its integrity, was not sad work. It was the opposite of sad. Irene sent me to school every morning. I made the honor roll with the specific grim energy of a person who is turning something into fuel. I got into the state university on a scholarship, and Irene drove me the morning of move-in day and helped me carry boxes and said, when we were done, that she was proud of me. She said it once, which was the right number for her. I majored in art history with a concentration in paper conservation. I came home to Harlow every summer. When I graduated at 22, I worked 2 years at a conservation lab in Burlington and saved what I could. When I was 24, Irene told me she was thinking about retiring, and what did I want to do about the shop? I told her I wanted to buy it. She said she had been waiting for me to say that. The transaction was clean. A real price, a real loan, monthly payments without exception. Irene spent 2 years still coming in a few mornings a week to finish the long-term projects she had running, and then she went home to her garden and her books, and I had the shop. I rebranded it, kept the bookbinding, but added fine art printing and the restoration services that were too specialized for most shops. I named it Reese Bindery, which had the double meaning of my own name and the word meaning a place where reeds grow, which seemed right for a place built on what survives. Within 3 years, I had accounts with 2 university libraries and a manuscript museum that sent me quarterly work. I had 2 assistants, a young woman named Petra, who had come in as an intern and stayed, and an older man named Claude, who could read 4 languages and repair vellum binding without breaking a sweat. I lived in the apartment above the shop, the same apartment I had slept in at 15 on the narrow cot. Now it had a proper bed and bookshelves built floor to ceiling, and Irene's old reading lamp by the chair where I did my own reading in the evenings. Strangers who came into the shop for the first time always remarked on the smell. Old paper and binding glue and beeswax, and something underneath it all that was just the accumulated patience of a place where things were being carefully repaired. They said it smelled like somewhere that understood what things were worth. They had no idea what it had cost to build, or how far I had walked from a platform in the dark to deserve to stand in it. It started, as these things often do, with someone who meant well. A woman came into the shop on a Tuesday in October to have a water-damaged journal rebound. She was in her 60s, pleasant, with the specific warm nosiness of a woman who had spent her life in a small town where everyone's business was the public's business. She told me her name was Lois Crandall, and that she was visiting her daughter who lived in Harlow. She handed me the journal, and while I examined the damage, she looked around the shop with the appraising eye of a woman mentally cataloguing everything she would describe later. Then she said she was originally from Culver County. My stomach dropped a floor. Culver County was the county where I had grown up, where the station at Millbrook was, where my mother's church was. Lois kept talking. She said wasn't it a small world, and that she actually knew a Sandra Pruitt from choir, who had a daughter named Nell, who had gone off and made something of herself. Wasn't that something? I kept my face level. I said that's interesting. She said Sandra talked about me sometimes. Said it was such a thing, the way families drift. Said Sandra had a gift for holding things together despite everything. I set the journal on the counter and gave Lois my professional estimate for the repair and told her when it would be ready. She thanked me and left, and the bell over the door rang, and I stood stood behind my counter in my shop for a long moment. Sandra had a gift for holding things together. My mother was still singing, 18 years later, still performing the story, with my name in the wrong part. I was not surprised. I was, in some cold specific way, clarified, because I had known that when they came, and the church lady visit told me they were coming, or something like them was coming, I was going to need more than my memory. 10 days after Lois Crandall came in with her journal, I got a message through the shop's contact form on the website. The sender name was Brandon Reese, my half-brother. I had not heard from Brandon in over a decade. He was 40 now and the message was short, just a note saying he had found me and was hoping we could talk and would I call him. I took 2 days before I responded, not because I was afraid, but because I needed to think about what I was walking into before I walked into it. I called him on a Thursday evening from the back room of the shop, after Petra and Claude had gone home. Brandon's voice was careful, the voice of a man who had practiced this conversation in the car, the same rehearsed warmth my sister-in-law voice had in the bookshop woman's description of my mother. He said it was so good to hear me. He said he had thought about me. He said things happened in families sometimes that people looked back on differently with time. He said these things for about 3 minutes, and in those 3 minutes, he did not say the word station. He did not say I'm sorry. He did not say they left you. I knew the shape of it before he got there. I asked him to say plainly what he needed. A pause on the line, the script running out. He said our stepfather Dale was sick. Kidney disease, stage 4, on dialysis 3 times a week. On the transplant list. The list was long and Dale was not young. The doctors had said a related donor, specifically a child or stepchild, was the best remaining option for a living donation. Brandon had been tested. Not a match. Sandra had been tested. Not a match. Which left me. He did not ask directly on that first call. He was smarter than that. He just made sure I understood the shape of the thing before I could think about the shape of the other thing. After we hung up, I sat in the back room for a long time. I was not angry. Angry would have been the simple response, and this was not a simple thing. I sat with it honestly the way Irene had taught me to sit with a damaged piece of work. Look at the full extent of the damage before you decide what it needs. Don't flinch. Don't rush. The honest assessment was this. My mother and stepfather had left a 15-year-old on a platform in November and told the county she had run away and told their church the same thing for 18 years. They had not called the shop. They had not sent a letter. They had found me because they needed something from my body. And some part of me, buried under 18 years of built things, the shop, the craft, the quiet, still knew what it felt like to be 15 and waiting for the taillights to turn around. That part was the part one did not trust. I made a decision. Before I let any of them near the thing I had built, before I sat across a table from my mother's face again, I was going to hold the record in my hands. The actual record, the deputy's notebook, Donna Price's file. I found Irene's old business card in the canvas bag. Behind it, folded twice, was Donna Price's county card from 18 years ago. The name, the case number, the county, the office. Irene had kept the canvas bag. She had put it on the shelf in the back room when I first arrived, and I had never asked her to take it down, and she had never moved it, and it had been there for 18 years with those 2 cards folded inside it. Some women save the proof because they know the day is coming. I went upstairs. I sat in the chair by Irene's old lamp, and I made the call I should have made years earlier. The county office was not the same county office it had been 18 years ago, 2 reorganizations and a new building, but the records were the same records. Because records do not reorganize. They just wait. I called a family law attorney in Burlington first, a woman named Ann Carver, who handled estate and family matters, and who came recommended by one of my university library clients. I told her the situation. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said I had every right to my own records, and that the process for requesting them was straightforward, and she walked me through each step. I filed a request for my Child Protective Services case file under my case number, which I had from Donna Price's card. I filed a request for the police welfare check report from the night of the incident, with the date and the county and the responding agency. I I wrote the shop address on the return line. Then I waited. I kept the shop open. I kept Petra and Claude from knowing more than they needed to know. I repaired a 17th century almanac for the museum and 2 family Bibles for a private collector, and a manuscript page that had suffered water damage in a flooded archive. I worked with my hands and let the waiting happen around the work. Brandon called again 12 days later. The warmth had thinned slightly, the way warmth does when the person behind it is running out of patience for the performance. He said the family had really been hoping to hear something. He said time was a factor with Dale's condition. He said they'd hate for things to get complicated. I said I'd have an answer for them soon. He said, we thought we'd drive up, see the shop, see how you're doing. I said, that's fine. Come on a Saturday. I said it like a welcome and meant it like a condition. After we hung up, I called and Carver back and told her about the visit. She said, good, let them come to you. Your space, your witnesses, your record. I said, the documents haven't arrived yet. She said, they will. They arrived on a Thursday. A thick manila envelope with the county seal, 2 separate enclosures rubber banded together, a cover letter from the records office in neutral official language. I waited until Petra and Claude had gone home. Then I sat at the long workbench under the shop lights and opened the envelope with a bone folder, the tool I use to score paper cleanly along a fold line, because when something matters, you use the right tool. The police welfare check report was on top. Reading it was the specific experience of watching your own life be confirmed by someone who had no stake in the outcome. There was the date. There was the time, 8:42 p.m. There was Gus Ferreira's name as the reporting party. There was Officer Coates's badge number and her account of the incident in the measured language of official documentation. She had written that a 15-year-old female presented at the ticket desk stating that her parents had dropped her at the station and left. She had noted the vehicle description I had given her. She had noted 2 separate attempts to contact the parents by telephone, both unanswered. She had noted that a message was left identifying herself and stating that the minor was in county custody. And then the line that I read 3 times before I set the paper down. The parents were reached the following morning. They stated the minor had chosen to leave and they declined to retrieve her. Declined to retrieve her. Not she ran away. Not she was a difficult child. Not the story my mother had been telling the choir for 18 years. Declined to retrieve her. I set the report down on the workbench beside a partially rebound atlas I had been working on. 2 things on the same surface, a damaged thing being restored and the document that told the truth about the damage. Then I opened the CPS file. Donna Price had been thorough. Her notes were detailed and dated and included, on page 3, a direct quotation from my mother that Donna had recorded, because she was the kind of social worker who understood that what people say in the first conversation is what they actually mean before they have time to revise it. The quotation read, she was always looking for a reason to make herself the victim. She ran off because she wanted to. Written down, dated, filed in a county office with a case number. The lie had a birthday now, a timestamp, an official document that placed it within weeks of the night on the platform, which meant it was not grief or misremembering. It was constructed. I sat on the workbench stool for a long time after that. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. What I felt was the specific ache of something that has been unseen for a very long time being seen, finally, by the only witnesses that had written it down. Then I made 2 copies of each document, filed the originals in the shop's fireproof cabinet where I keep client contracts, put 1 set of copies in Carver's office by courier the next morning, and 1 set I put in a plain manila folder and set on the corner of the workbench beside the atlas. Then I called Brandon back and confirmed that Saturday would work. Saturday came up the calendar the way hard things always come, slowly and then at once. The shop opened at 9. By 10, the front room was active the way it gets on a good Saturday. 2 walk-in customers examining the prints in the front case. A regular named Martin, who brought his own coffee, and spent an hour reading in the armchair we kept near the window, Petra running the counter, Claude working at the back bench on a water-stained map. I worked the floor and tried to be present for every customer and mostly succeeded except for the part of me that was counting down from a number I didn't know the size of. The bell over the door rang at 11:20. Brandon came in first. He was 40 now, broader than I remembered, with the posture of someone who had spent years managing the gap between what he wanted and what he had. He held the door for my mother, Sandra, 57 years old, still pretty in the way the photographs had always recorded. Her good coat, her church posture, her chin at the angle that meant she had already decided what kind of room this was and intended to establish it immediately. Dale came in behind her, and I was not prepared for how sick he looked. He was thin in the specific way of people whose bodies are working hard at something other than holding weight. He moved carefully. He was 63 and looked older. They stopped just inside the door, and the three of them stood in the full warm light of my shop with the prints on the walls and the smell of beeswax, and old paper, and the sound of Saturday. My mother's eyes moved across the room. I watched her register it, the press, the cases, the long workbench, Petra professional at the counter. Claude bent over his map without looking up. The framed certificates on the wall, the name on the glass, Reese Bindery. Something crossed her face that she recovered from quickly. Something that looked, for just a moment, like recalculation. I came out from behind the counter. I walked across my own floor to meet them the same way I walk toward any customer who has just come in from the cold. My mother opened her arms. She said my name the way she used to say it when there was an audience, Nell, like a hymn, like a greeting card. She hugged me with the theatricality of a woman performing a reunion rather than having one, and she said for the benefit of the room, that she hadn't seen her daughter in so long, and that it was a blessing. Martin looked up from his book. Petra's eyes flicked toward me. I let my mother have the hug. I kept my arms at my sides for exactly 2 seconds, and then I stepped back, because 2 seconds was what courtesy required. I seated them in the reading area, the 3 chairs near the window that we kept for clients who needed to review longer-term work. It put them facing into the room rather than cornered against the wall. That was intentional. I brought water. I sat across from them on the rolling stool I use at the workbench. My mother did not wait long before she got to work. She said how wonderful the shop was, how she always knew I would land on my feet, how resourceful I had always been. She said time had a way of putting things in perspective. She said what mattered was family. She said it for the room as much as for me, and I knew it, because she said it at a volume that carried, and her eyes moved between my face and the other faces in the space. I let her finish. Then I said, quietly and without heat, in the voice I use when I am explaining something important to a client about the extent of damage to their piece. Before we talk about anything else, I want to make sure we're talking about the same night. My mother's smile didn't change. What do you mean, sweetheart? The station, I said. Millbrook Station, November, 18 years ago. You ran off, she said. She said it immediately, reflexively, the way you say a thing you've said so many times it no longer sounds like a choice. You were always so dramatic. We were heartbroken. She said it for the room. Martin had put his book down. I reached beside me to the low shelf where I had placed the plain manila folder before the shop opened, and I brought it out and set it on the table between us. I opened it the way I open a damaged manuscript, slowly, with intention, with the specific care of someone who understands that what's inside is irreplaceable. This, I said, is the police welfare check report from the night of the incident, filed by Officer Coates of the Millbrook County Sheriff's Department. I laid it flat on the table so it faced them. I'd like to read you the relevant line. My mother's smile had not moved. Dale was looking at the floor. Brandon was looking at the window. I read the line. Flat, steady, the way you read a binding specification, or a client's restoration notes. The parents were reached the following morning. They stated the minor had chosen to leave and they declined to retrieve her. The room was quiet. I set the second document beside it, the CPS file page, Donna Price's notes, the direct quotation. This, I said, is from the Child Protective Services file that was opened on my case that week. This is a social worker named Donna Price quoting what you told her. I read it. She ran off because she wanted to. I folded my hands on the table. That's what you told the county social worker within 2 weeks of the night on the platform. I want to make sure everyone here understands the timeline. My mother's face shifted. The warmth performance dropped like a coat off a hook. She said, "How dare you bring paperwork into this? This is a family matter." Her voice had risen just enough for the whole front room to hear. Petra did not look up from the counter, but her hand, which had been reaching for a receipt book, went still. My mother said I had always made myself the victim. She said I was punishing a sick man for something that had been a misunderstanding. She said the story I was telling was my version, which was not the same as the truth. She said this in my shop with the county's document on the table between us. Martin, in the armchair, had not turned the page of his book in 5 minutes. I let my mother's voice run out. When it did, I looked at Dale. He had been quiet the entire time. He was looking at the welfare check report. He was reading it. I watched him read the line. His face didn't perform anything. It just changed the way faces change when the record contradicts what you've decided to remember. He set the paper down very carefully on the table. He did not speak. I looked at my mother and I said the only sharp thing I said all day, and I said it quietly, because the quiet was the point. You told me to find my own way home. I did. You're sitting in it. A silence. Then I gave them my answer, calm and complete, no heat behind it. I said no. I would not be tested. I would not donate. I said why, plainly, in a full sentence, so it could not be edited later. I said that people who leave a 15-year-old on a platform in November and then tell the county she chose to leave do not get to come back for her body at 33. I said it without drama, which is the only way a thing lands all the way. I told Dale I hoped he found a match, and that I would send an Carver's referral to a specialist in Burlington who worked with transplant cases, because wishing him well cost me nothing and the opposite would have cost me something I wasn't willing to spend. Dale looked up from the table. He said 2 things, both true, both broken. He said, I should have turned the car around. And then, I know that doesn't fix it. I nodded once, because a true thing deserves a nod, even when it is 2 decades late. Then I stood up. I held the door the way I hold it for anyone leaving my shop. My mother gathered herself with the practiced efficiency of a woman who has always recovered faster than everyone else in the room. She said something under her breath as she passed me. I did not catch it and did not try. Brandon paused in the doorway. He looked at me the way Renee had looked at Atlee, the true thing sitting just behind his eyes, not quite ready to come through. He said my name, just my name. Then he followed them out. Dale went last. He paused on the threshold, not looking at me, looking at the shop. He said, she built something. I don't know if he meant me. I don't know if he meant Irene. Maybe both. The bell rang. The door closed. 3 sets of footsteps on the sidewalk outside, fading. I stood at the door for a moment. Then I went back to the workbench and picked up my bone folder and went back to the atlas. The room settled back into itself the way a room does after something has moved through it. Martin picked up his book. Claude bent back over his map. Petra's hand found the receipt book she had been reaching for before my mother's voice had stopped it. Nobody made a fuss, which was the best thing that could have happened. About 20 minutes after they left, Martin finished his chapter, folded the page corner down the way he always did despite knowing I had opinions about folding page corners, and stood up to leave. He stopped at the counter and put on his coat and looked at me. He said, good, that was the whole thing. 1 word. I said, thank you for staying. He waved it off and went out into the Saturday afternoon. Petra waited until the door closed. Then she looked at me and said, do you need anything? I said, can you cover the front for another hour? She said yes without asking why, which was the right answer. I went upstairs. I sat in the chair by the lamp. I stayed there for a while without doing anything that looked like a task. I thought about Irene. I thought about the canvas bag on the shelf. I thought about Donna Price's card folded behind Gus Ferreira's station business card that Irene must have slipped into the bag that first week, without telling me, the way she did things she believed mattered, quietly, thoroughly, without announcement. I thought about the specific knowledge that Irene Marsh had watched me for 18 years, had watched a difficult and careful person build something real, and had saved the scraps from the night of the station, because she was a woman who believed that the truth survived if you kept the proof. Irene had been gone 3 years. She had left the shop to me on paper, though we had already made that trade formally years before, and she had left me a letter that I kept in the drawer of the reading table that I had never told anyone about. I went to the drawer and took out the letter. It was short, the way Irene was always short, precise in the way she was always precise. She had written that she wanted me to know that the night she came across the station lot to see what a deputy and a child were doing in her quiet town, she had looked at me in the station light, and seen something that she wanted to be careful not to say wrong. She wrote that she had seen a person who had been handled badly and was not broken by it. She wrote that she had kept the papers from the canvas bag, the business card, the social worker's card, because she had raised enough books to know that the original source document is always worth more than the copy, and you never know when someone is going to need to check the record. She wrote, "You were never the problem, Nell. You were always the proof." I folded the letter on its original crease and put it back in the drawer, and went downstairs and finished my Saturday. A letter arrived from Brandon 3 weeks later. No return address on the envelope. 3 paragraphs, careful, rehearsed, the word sorry not quite appearing in any of them, circled around by phrases like "I wish things had been different," and "I hope you can understand we were in a difficult position." I read it twice, then I put it in the same drawer as Irene's letter, not as a wound, but as a record. I never heard whether Dale found a match. I made a genuine effort not to find out, not because I wished him harm, but because keeping track of that information required keeping a door open that I had decided needed to be closed. The specialist referral was sent through and Carver's office. Whatever happened after that happened without me. Which was the point? I framed the welfare check report. I want to be specific about that because it matters. Not the whole report, just the relevant line, mounted in a simple frame, hung in the back workroom where Petra and Claude and I work. Not in the front of the shop where customers would ask about it. In the back, where I can see it from the workbench. The parents declined to retrieve her. Below that, I had the bookbinder's trade card of Irene Marsh, the card that had been in the canvas bag for 18 years, soft at the corners, the address on it and the simple line below her name. Specialist in the repair of things worth keeping. Those 2 things in one frame, the record of what happened and the record of what was done with it. Petra asked me once what the framed things were. I told her the first one was documentation from a case I had been involved in and the second was Irene's card. She looked at both of them for a moment. She said, "She sounds like she was good at her job." I said, "She was the best." Then we went back to work. Here is what I know now. A platform in November is a place your body remembers before your mind does. The cold, the sound of the rails, the specific yellow of fluorescent light on concrete. I carry that platform the way certain injuries leave a sensitivity in a joint, not always present, not debilitating, just there when the pressure is right. But here is what else is true. I carry it alongside the smell of old paper and beeswax. I carry it alongside the sound of Petra asking an intelligent question about adhesive. I carry it alongside the weight of a bone folder in the right hand and the specific satisfaction of a clean score. My mother tried to teach me that I could not find my way without her. What she actually taught me was how to navigate in the dark, how to take the facts as they come, how to walk into a station and find the people who write things down. I found my way home. I built it. It has a pressed tin ceiling and a long wooden counter I refinished myself, and a bell over the door that rings when people choose to come in. It took 18 years. It cost me things I am still counting. But the shop is mine and the documents are filed and the lie has a case number now and a date and a deputy's signature, and a room full of witnesses who watched my mother say one thing to a room where the paper said another. Paper doesn't lie. It just waits until you're ready to bring it out. I was ready on a Saturday in November. The same month it started. Same month, different outcome. This time, I was the one who stayed put in my own warm place. The taillights in the dark, the tin ceiling, the bell. That's my story. If you've ever had someone tell your story without telling the truth, tell me where you're listening from in the comments below. Subscribe to Sweet Payback Stories, where the truth always finds its way home.